Once upon a very early time, when the world was just settling in, there was quite a bit more green. Living in the green were the little fuzzies and flying winged whizzers, swimmy bloops, and swift scaly whaleys. One of the fuzzies was a wabbit, much like the bunny rabbit. The wabbit had a very long tail. Long, of course, means that the tail was wavy and long. The wabbit had a 7-length long tail end to hind end. Look at that long wabbit tail. The other animals loved that long wabbit tail. Love, of course, means to love something with a warm heart. Yes, they loved that long wabbit tail. You could always find Wabbit's tail in a hide-and-seekers game, and that long tail would tickle noses when it passed by. One day, Wabbit went to Wise Owl to ask how she could make her tail more wonderful. "More wonderful than it already is," said Owl. "Well, if you want to make your tail truly wonderful, there's only one way. Climb the winter stone on the edge of the green, and when you return, every length of your tail will be more wonderful than it is now." Well, Wabbit woke early to climb up the winter stone, which to you and me is a mountain. At the bottom of the winter stone, Wabbit saw Joe Rilla with a worried look on his face. "Joe, why the worry?" "Wabbit, my friend, I have no string for my bow, which I use to keep the wascals out of the green." "Seems very serious, Joe. Take a length of my tail to use as a string for your bow to keep all the fuzzies, winged whizzers, bloops, and scaly whaleys safe." Trim the tail, stretched and hung, string strung, just one length, not so much. Wabbit happily walked up the winter stone, imagining how wonderful her tail would be when she returned. Then she came upon a foxy looking forlorn. "Foxy, why the frown?" "I broke the cord on my harp that sings my sweetheart home. She's lost on the winter stone and cannot find her way back to me." "Foxy, my tail will work as a cord for your harp." "Trim the tail, crank, crunk, clink, clunk." He called his sweetheart with his harp clear over the winter stone, and when she heard his chords, she ran into his arms. In no time, Wabbit was climbing high above the trees and noticed a rocky prison with a caddy inside looking hungry and scared. "Caddy, are you trapped?" "I'm more than trapped. I cannot climb down the rocks without falling. If only I had a rope, I would make a ladder to climb down to the lower landing." "Caddy, could you make a ladder from my tail?" "I would like to try." Trim the tail, knit some knots, ladder taut. Caddy climbed down to the next landing with ease. Worth the trim. Climbing on, Wabbit felt something pull her tail. When she looked back, she saw a birdie weaving her tail into his nest. "Oh, birdie, that is my tail you are weaving into your nest." "Oh my, why it is, and what a lovely tail it is. Perfect for the last stitch in my nest. Please, oh please, Wabbit, you have such a long tail for any fuzzy. Would you consider allowing me just this small bit?" "Well, okay, birdie, it seems it's stitched in already, and is just a little bit." Trim the tail, weave wove, birdie's abode. Wabbit had to admit it was getting easier to hike without such a long, heavy tail. Beside a pond, Wabbit saw a wattle who had a whittle wobbling beside her, shivering cold. "Brrr," said the whittle. "Fluff your feathers and you'll be warm," said the mother wattle to her whittle. "But mother, I can't fluff the feathers around my neck. It's chilled to the bone." The baby was shivering and quaking so hard, Wabbit decided to offer another piece of her tail. "Mother Wattle, please let me give a length of my tail to your whittle. Then his neck will be protected from the chilly wind." Trim the tail, neck adorn, whittle is warm. Across the pond, a thin man was bringing up an empty nest from the water. "Well, this just won't do at all," said the thin man. Wabbit was curious and went to get a closer look. "This net has so many holes, it's barely a net anymore. I don't know how we will get fish for the people on the mountain." Trim the tail, make a net, many fish it will get. Wabbit was gone when the thin man returned, surprised to find his net intact. After a long climb to the summit, Wabbit reached the top of the winter stone. Wabbit stood on her back legs and put her long ears into the air, and then she stood on her toes and put her long tail in the air. Oh. Her tail was not so long anymore and did not reach above her head at all. Wabbit wondered what happened to her plans of having a big, wonderful tail. She saw that her tail was now barely noticeable at all, only a little over one length remaining. In the evening, the clouds were full and rumbly as the storm moved over the winter stone. A mouse was running back and forth looking for something on the ground. "Oh me, oh my!" "Hello there," said Wabbit. "Oh me, oh my star," said Mouse. "What is all this running about, Mouse?" "I'm on a very important scavenge tonight. As the storm comes, so are the boats coming to the shore. We must have a wick to burn the light in the lighthouse for the boats to see. I'm the house mouse for the lighthouse, you see. Very important scavenge for a house mouse." "You're right, Mouse. You need to find a string or something to burn a flame." Wabbit and the house mouse looked all over the top of the winter stone for something to burn. "Got it," said Mouse, pulling Wabbit's tail into the air. "You got me," said Wabbit. Mouse and Wabbit looked at each other and their faces turned to frowns. After a short pause, Wabbit said, "You did get it, Mouse. You can have my tail to use as a wick. Trim it, then the boats will see the shore tonight." It was the very last length of Wabbit's tail, but there was a great need. Trim the tail, make a light for boats in the night. Using Wabbit's tail as a wick to burn, the light shone from the tall lighthouse across the sea, and all over the winter stone, from their trees, hulls, caves, and hovels, the animals saw the light coming from the lighthouse and flickering on the boats, jumping on the waves. The next morning, Wabbit woke to go home. Owl had been wrong. Wabbit's tail was not even one length, only a fluff ball on Wabbit's hind end, and Wabbit hopped home. When Wabbit entered the green, she saw a crowd of animals following her. "I suppose they see my tail and how small it is now. I suppose they'll be sorry I won't be tickling noses any more." Wabbit's head drooped to the ground. Her hop slowed to a stop. Her friends came closer, and Wabbit could hear them talking. "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen her tail for myself. The lighthouse used our Wabbit's tail. Oh, and you see there was his whittle. And the foxy's bride and he embraced." All the fuzzies, the winged wizards, the bloops, and scaly whalies were telling wonderful stories about Wabbit's tail while she was helping others on the winter stone. It was not a long tale anymore, but the stories of Wabbit's big heart lasted a long time, even until now. Animals from the green and beyond came to see Wabbit's little tail, much more impressive as a fuzzball than its 7 lengths. They all loved Wabbit's tail more than before. For each loving deed it was trimmed. In the green, on the stone, in your neighborhood, at home, the best stories will be of wonderful, loving hearts. The end.